Hello and welcome to this video. This is the replay of the full moon in Virgo ceremony that I hosted last night on March 13th. Now, I'm about to edit this video and I am going to pop in here and there so that you know exactly why I'm sharing something with you. Because I watched the ceremony afterwards and I thought, oh my gosh, I can deepen or I can expand on a topic that I mentioned so that you know how to apply the energy and you know how to do some shadow work. So here's the thing that I'm really discovering about myself, and you'll probably laugh that you're like, duh. I am not all love and light. I have been pissed off. I have been so sad. I have been furious about how the patriarchy has changed our civilization and how the patriarchy that started a long, long time ago, that changed 300,000 years of goddess worship, unity, egalitarian society, respect for each other, respect for the earth and her resources, how that changed. But not just that it happened in history in the past, it's still happening right now. Now, I'm taking my time to give you this introduction to the video because one of the things that I am actively releasing, I don't want to say working, one of the things that I'm focused on releasing is this need to do everything right on the internet. There was a time where I saw my bank account go down almost to zero and realized I better do something to create more business. And 13 months from that realization, doing my books, I opened a gym. I opened a brick and mortar gym with overhead in 13 months. After I had the gym, I really started to get business advice. But leading up to it, it was your girl. And I was in a little marketing group that met like once a week or like once a month, whatever it was. But I mostly did it. And I did it because I had that internal drive and that internal power. And I had a really strong belief in what I was doing was valid, I guess, for me to be able to go from almost zero to opening a space in 13 months. And what I am focusing on right now with this Virgo energy to let go of the perfectionism, to let go of the overthinking, to let go of thinking that I need to do anything in a certain way and that I can take my time. Because a lot of times I get in my head that I'm taking up too much time from other people. And so I rush because I have voices in my head that I have paid for that say, don't do long form, don't talk so long, keep it to 20 minutes. People can't digest this. And when I listened to this video of mine, of the ceremony, I realized that there was such amazing information in this that if I had gone a little bit slower, it would have landed in the body more. And the whole point of doing this work and doing the full moon ceremonies is that we get back into our bodies because we have the evolutionary transits. We have the transpersonal planets, the outer planets that take a really long time to rotate around the sun that also influence the collective consciousness. So the collective consciousness is what creates our civilizations. So like we have the Bronze Age, the Gilded Age, the this age, the that age. That's all in part to where the transpersonal planets were at the time. And these transpersonal planets are moving in 2025. And there is a conjunction on February 20th of 2026 where a masculine planet and a feminine planet are going to be having a little bit of a confrontation or emerging, however you want to look at it. And the last time that this conjunction happened at 0 degrees Aries was during colonization, during the witch hunts. And the witch hunts may be claimed upwards of 9 million, I think is maybe, like nobody really knows. But a lot of people, mostly women, were tortured until they died. And they had horrific torture. And the ironic part about some of their torture, it was sexual torture, which doesn't really make sense for the priests to be advocating for this type of torture and interrogation, because part of why they were murdering women was because of sexuality. So it really doesn't make sense. There's a lot of things that do not make sense about our systems, and they are stemming from a time in which the goddess and unity and creation and equality were changed for hierarchy. And when we have this energy coming back in 2026 that was very alive and active during a time of great genocidal conquest, we can prepare for it. And I am very committed to this because realizing it for myself has made so many of the things in my life make sense for how I perceive things, how I have my intuition, the life experiences that I've had personally, and then how my chart is designed, how many planets I have in retrograde that kind of makes sense for me to be obsessed with the past and really be able to attune to the energy and feel it and notice how it's operating in the world and notice how it operates within our own psyche and how we're feeling about our body and our weight and our diet and food. And so when you're watching this video, I'm going to pop in and expand on something a little bit more so that you have a greater understanding of why this is so relevant. Because I know for me, when I was really hated my body and was really extreme with my diet, really extreme with the cardio, if someone had said, just slow down and take a look at the energy and the astrology and orient your life around the cycles of the moon, I would be like, no, 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 no. Just tell me what to eat. Tell me how to exercise so I can get into the body of my dreams. I would not be listening to this. And I want to let you know that in hindsight of doing inner work for 15 years and really knowing how to get through some of these limiting beliefs to have a lifestyle that I can have a body that's fit and healthy and doesn't give me a lot of issues like it used to, that this is really important. And this will really cut a lot of the hard work, like maybe even in half, because you're going to learn how we have gotten indoctrinated to not listen to our body, to overwork ourselves, and then how that messes with our mind. And that if we attune to the natural rhythms of the earth through the moon, if we attune our habits to that, then we're really going to be able to see some changes that are truly the lifestyle shift, and that will allow us to have the sustainable results. So I'll see you later on in the video. Welcome to the very first full moon ceremony. I'm very excited to share this with you. You have the replay that's up on YouTube, so you might be watching this after the full moon, but this energy is going to be like emanating for the next 2 weeks after March 14th of 2025, but then also you can tap into this at any time that you want to release some perfectionist beliefs that you might have around yourself, your habits, or your body. So the Virgo full moon, what you are seeing right here is the axis of the Virgo energy in the 6th house and then the 12th house of Pisces. And so what we're really working with as the feminine archetypal energy tonight is the cosmic mother in the 12th house of Pisces, where it is all the intelligence of the zodiac, all of the deep wisdom and psychic illusion and delusion of the cosmos. And then how we actually ground this energy with the reflection of the cosmic mother in the earth goddess of Virgo, who's also known as the harvest goddess. So this is going to be really exciting to share with you. And as you saw, if you have the email from your sign up, you're going to see that we have 5 phases of tonight's ceremony that we are going to get into now. So I shared with you in your prep email that we are going to have a little bit of history. So I have been reading almost every single day this book called The Great Cosmic Mother, and it is about the 300,000 years of goddess worship as being the one deity. and how the Yahweh, or the Old Testament God, came into power, and then also some of the time before this Yahweh God came into power, and how there was a slow um uh break apart of the matriarchal egalitarian society where everybody was viewed as equal, and how the jealousy that men had towards women who could create life, who could sustain life, and then who could birth life, and then who could feed life, and also how we were able to bleed without dying and bleed without a wound. And so this book goes really in depthly to various ages of the development of our current society. And there's a lot of the things that happened way back then, 4 to 8,000 years ago, that you could actually see the patterns of behavior play out into today's society. So what I wanted to share with you, just a few little pieces of it, of the main points of how we've gotten disembodied from our own body, and then also from being connected to the moon. So first of all, Yahweh displaced the goddess of the moon, and so that also displaced fertility and water. And so there's electromagnetic currents that transmit psychic energy through water, and they directly interact with our bodies, men bodies as well. But the fertility portion of it in general, with the male god that was formed by men and the prehistoric female goddess that all indigenous cultures all over the world believed before colonization, is that the fertility was from the mother herself. It wasn't just that we were this capsule for another being to gestate within us. We kind of got switched to, instead of being creator, to just the house of what is created. And so a lot of these things, why I mention them so often now in my Instagram content and also here tonight, is because a lot of the issues that we have with our body image have to do with what was indoctrinated way back then, that is carried on either in behavior of our culture or on a cellular level from our mothers, our mothers, our mothers, our grandmothers, great grandmothers, all of those, on and on and on and on. Part two of just these little five excerpts is looking at how all the religious, spiritual, and cultural values symbolized by the moon of Isis were now strategically transferred by priests of the sun cult coming under male control. And so the Abrahamic religions of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are also known as the sun cults, because before the patriarchy, it was actually the moon and transmitting the information that the moon was reflecting from the cosmos to us, so that we could grow and evolve cyclically with the natural rhythms of nature. And you're going to hear something totally crazy about the eclipse that we're having and how it relates to the colonial times when Christopher Columbus came to the Americas. Okay, part three, there's just a couple more. Basically, to interpret the flow of terrestrial magnetism, everything participates. The movement of the celestial bodies, the pulse of the tides, the circulation of blood and sap in animals and trees. So when women gathered underneath the moon, they were there to talk about what was going on in their community, what was going on with themselves, and then also what was going on with nature, so that they could plant and harvest, so that they could hunt, so that everything was sustained in balance. And so the phases of the moon actually have an impact on all of these different phases throughout this like 28-day, 29-day cycle. And in order for the men to take charge of the community and create a hierarchy, not only did they have to make the moon evil, they had to turn women into witches. And then that's what ended up having the witch hunts that lasted for 500 years, where if you practiced herbal medicine, if you knew what plants would help you relieve pain or enhance your consciousness, like psilocybin with mushrooms, all of that was put into witchcraft, and that allowed us to be murdered so that this new god could take form that was based on hierarchy and suffering, and only focus on the afterlife, and that this earthly presence was the sinful area of the life experience. I was editing the video and I realized I did not share with you this slide, so we have to go over it really quickly. Menstruation is the visible bloody sign of the serpent, all evil from this original female evil, moon blood. There is a lot of things around the menstruation and blood in general that has gotten so distorted, and it really inhibits us from creating something magical within our own lives. So very quickly, I just want to share with you that part of the blood issue is that in the matriarchal egalitarian societies where the society was orchestrated and like managed around the moon, but also around women's menstrual cycles. And so if you think back to a time before there was like written language where we really didn't know exactly like what time of the month should you try to conceive with ovulation, like there wasn't really a known way that women got pregnant. There's some parts of the book where they talk about that the people just thought that the wind inseminated people because it was like all of a sudden there's a baby. Like, how does that happen? And the knowing though that having a baby inside of a body and being able to grow and then be birthed and then be nurtured by that body with breastfeeding, there was definitely some recognition of how powerful the womb and blood is. And if a woman was not pregnant and she was menstruating and she was bleeding without a wound and she bled without dying, like that's pretty phenomenal, right? If you're thinking back to that time. So part of what was actually happening in that time to create a balance with the world, we only stay alive by something else dying, whether it's a plant or it's an animal. And so to keep balance with the earth, there was blood ritual where there was sometimes sacrifice. There was sometimes sacrifice of people. And that seems to be a little bit later in the Stone Age of where people were being sacrificed. But if we scale it back to just the menstrual cycle, because I really want to share with you things that affect our body image and our self-esteem and our connection to our body, and also to the fallout of society right now, because what we're seeing in society is part of the patriarchy, and we want it to fall apart so that we can birth something new. So the period. If a woman did not have a baby growing inside of her and she was on her menses, the blood was actually given back to the earth, poured into the dirt, poured onto rocks, smeared on people's faces because the blood was nutritious. And so if there wasn't a blood sacrifice or like to balance the blood sacrifice that mother gave to us to eat an animal or to eat a plant, to balance that sacrifice of her body for us, we gave back menstrual blood because of the nutrition and because it was blood, and blood is associated with death. So if you have this whole society that's based around the ebbs and flows of the moon because they could follow seasonal cyclical events with the moon, and they also connected it to the period, which you're going to see that measurement actually was also called menses. Like so many things in our society now were actually founded on the menstrual cycle. And so when we're looking at this as something that was made to either birth a person or or form a person, give a person nutrition, or it was given back to the earth to create balance, when the patriarchy took things out of balance and made a hierarchy, they also, though, had to create some sort of giving back. And so that's where you see a lot of like sacrificial torture type blood ritual. And when I was reading that, I thought, oh, this makes so much sense for like the stuff about the Illuminati and the cults and why people are doing horrendous things to other people in general, because there's supposed to be a balance. And so if the patriarchy has pulled things so far out of balance to never give back to the earth, then there's going to have to be something very extreme to give back. And further into the book, it goes into why we have the war machine, because war gives mass sacrifice in a to balance out the mass sacrifice that earth has given us. And so it goes so deep. And I just want to say one more thing to like give a little bit more context, that the egalitarian societies, even when it became agricultural and people were settling, that you would rotate the crops and you had crops that had to do with what was going on seasonally. But the patriarchy wants a mechanic. It wants to produce more. It wants to have wealth. It wants to have power. And so then she talks about in this book how then it became the rape of the actual feminine body of the earth, because there was so many crops just being pulled out of her, pulled out of her, pulled out of her. And so when you see how there's like industrial farming, it started a long, long time ago. And in order to even balance that of like the very beginning of agricultural society, that when the men took it over and just overproduced to have accumulation, then they had to come in with war so that there would be enough blood sacrifice of people dying to balance out how much was being taken from the earth. And the more I think about this, like the more I relate it to like what we know about now. I think about Buffalo Bill and how all these Europeans came over to the Americas and decimated the buffalo. And before that, the indigenous cultures only killed a buffalo that they needed for the fur, for the organs, for the food. They didn't go out and just kill it all for the sake of killing. And so we really see how this shows up in our life of consumerism, but also about us, about the female body and what we are disowning about ourselves and rejecting about ourselves and shaming ourselves. It also goes back to this. And I'll tell you something. My last menstrual cycle, I use a cup. I don't use tampons. And I poured my blood into a beautiful container and that has a lid on it. Then I hid it away. And when I was pretty much done with my bleed, I took that out and I poured it into the ground and I said, thank you. Because I thought, you know what? If I'm really going to do this feminine reclamation thing and I am going to embody fully feminine, this is coming from someone who used to like only wear sports bras to smash down my breasts. I'm going to go all out. I'm going to go all out as much as I possibly can and orchestrate my life around the moon and around my menses. And I'm going to give my blood back to the earth. And I'm going to see how much more whole I can feel so that I can move past my anger and my sadness, because this is really putting me in bad moods a whole lot. Okay, this is the last one, is that moon, mind, measurement, month, and menstruation were kind of all interchangeable words. And when I read that, that's when I changed my little thing at the bottom where it says moon body, because our unconscious, the deep seat, the reptilian part of our brain is actually the part that psychically transmits information. And back in the day, the snake was actually the symbol of the woman, because a snake sheds her skin without dying, similarly to how a woman sheds her womb without dying. And so the snake then became evil to represent the devils, and women came to represent the devil. And the mind, the unconscious reptilian mind, is actually this connection that we have to our deep psychic ability. And so what I've been educating myself on is how our menstrual cycle and the moon cycle are these like perfectly designed ebbs and flows to where we can transmit information, process it, integrate it, use our intuition and set intentions to then grow something into reality. That there's just this continual cycle of birth, growth, death, birth, growth, death. And for the Abrahamic religions, that does not fall in line with what they say. It's all about death for the afterlife. And the other part that I had changed recently is I put evolutionary moon body fitness coach, because evolution, growth and evolution over time, and viewing time and the astrology as a cyclical event was something that the patriarchy didn't want us to know. Because if we do know what energy is coming and what has happened in the past, we can learn from it and not fall for the same joke. And so they don't want us to know that. But the more you understand this energy and the more you watch what's playing out with politics, the more you can actually see that they're playing the same game. It's just under the current context of our life. And you'll see that again with the eclipse that we're having tonight in Christopher Columbus. This is part two, and I realized that I did not talk about this figure until I was going off about body image, and I kind of said it really fast, and I want to come back here and talk about it a little bit more clearly. So, this image is an image of the goddess, and the goddess was often depicted as a snake at the bottom and a bird at the top. And the snake is the terrestrialness of her, and the bird is the cosmicness of her. And the snake was revered and symbolized the woman because a snake sheds skin, doesn't die, similarly to how a woman sheds her womb lining if she is not pregnant and she bleeds without dying. She sheds her skin without dying, the internal skin. And the higher mind to have this like larger perspective, right? If you're at the top of a building, you're going to be able to get some context to why there's a traffic jam when you're coming out of the building, because you're like, oh, there's an accident 3 blocks away, which is making getting out of this parking structure really slow because that's how far the traffic is backed up. But you would have no idea unless you were looking out a really tall window, right? So, part of the patriarchal separation of the mind and body, which I'm going to get into even more with long form videos, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense on such a deeper level, not just the mind body split within us that causes chronic conditions, but the spiritual mind body split. That if we had the symbology of the feminine, of the oneness of the creator, that had a bird element to it, to have the higher mind, which was also connected to the cosmos through the moon and the moon mind, the reptilian part of the brain. And then there was the terrestrial aspect, that we were actually embodied. We are part of the goddess in the flesh. When the patriarchy separated this, they had to make something evil and the enemy. So that's where we also got into the snake being evil. And that's where the higher mind and the afterlife of whoever's going to come save us became the thing that the patriarchal religions colonized us with. So that's what I wanted to share with you about that figure, because I forgot to mention it when I started this. So we're going to go back to the ceremony. Okay, so this is part two. Is since this moon is about embodying the cosmic wisdom from that Pisces placement, the questions to start to ask yourself now is, how do I judge my body? How do I judge my moods? And how do I listen to my body's wisdom? And this is really important because your intuition is going to play out through your body in all different ways. And the mood, this one really got to me because I'm in a part of the book, and then I just bought more books because the author referenced these other books. I'm in a part of the book where it talks about how in the medieval times there was almost a resurgence of viewing life as one continuous evolution, and that everything was connected and everything should really be equal, that there isn't a hierarchy. And in order for the Catholic Church to prevent that from becoming mainstream again, they had to take the people who were poor because of what they were doing to the indigenous religions before the belief in Yahweh. They had to make the people who were beggars and homeless crazy. they had to make an issue out of people who weren't fitting into that norm. And then that's when we started to actually get diagnoses of mental disorders and the hospitalization. But back then, the hospitals were actually equipped with dungeons where they would torture people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when we judge our moods, and I'm learning this a lot for myself because I'm very moody, that the moods are actually there for us to process energy. Because if you really think about what it is to be a woman and our intuition, that we're moody because we're actually transmitting pain. We are picking up on sadness, and the emotion that covers sadness is anger. And for like the last like month, over 4 weeks, I've just been really angry and really sad because I'm reading how a lot of the problems in the world originated by the hatred of the female body and the hatred of women, and I can see it. I can see it play out on the World Forum. I can see the core of it play out on the World Forum, and so it really bothers me. And so this whole thing about our moods is that I want to share with you this knowledge from this book, that we have moods with the menstrual cycle, but we also have moods with the moon. And instead of us judging anything about our body or our moods, if we could actually get back into communion with the earth, then we could actually see what energies are being illuminated by the moon that make sense for us to be having a mood swing. And with that, your journal prompt, I went ahead and gave you what mine are. And so I judge my body if I'm not as lean as my leanest, because then I'm not in alignment with my work and I feel like a fraud. So I go through that because my weight fluctuates, and I judge myself when it goes up because I'm like, you're not practicing what you preach, like you should not be like this, and all of that kind of stuff pops up in my head. How do I judge my moods? I should be consistent with my moods. I should be happy. I should be able to snap out of a bad mood. How do I listen to my body's wisdom? This one I really thought about, and I think that this was important because when I had a lot of my repressed emotions, I didn't sense my intuition until I was in a flare. So it took me quite a while to figure out how my body actually speaks to me. So I'll sense a lump in my throat, or like it's even happening on this call where the swallowing just kind of happens on its own when I'm trying to just like be in my mind presently. I'm just trying to let the words flow based on what I know as embodied wisdom without actually trying to think about what I'm telling you. And so that happens, like you'll see me like almost like gag because my throat will swallow on its own. And then also, I feel kind of like my chest expands and moves forward if something is a yes. And then I feel kind of a backward sensation of my breastplate sinking when there's a no. And then when something's like a really good hit, I feel like like I feel like a centering. And a lot of people will talk about when something's a no, they feel a contraction. I feel like a coming closer to me, and that makes me feel like, okay, my aura that's also storing information, it just landed. Like that's more what it feels like, but I feel kind of like a pulling in. And this happens a lot after what some people will call a calibration or a connection. But if we're going back to the goddess idea of that there is a birth, a growth period, and a death, there are labor pains associated when we have a growing period where it's really hard for us to process the information. But then, like, eventually there's the light at the end of the tunnel where, like, we feel that emotional relief. And so that moment for me feels like, boom, like more like a landing happens. This slide is a picture that I overlaid from the Cosmic Space Witch, and the Cosmic Space Witch, her name is Allie. She's really incredible, and her astrology is a big deep dive because she goes to the galactic center for her readings, and she also like the galactic center has galaxies circling around it, including ours, and then she also does asteroids, and her videos are like 2.5 hours long when she does moon videos. But this is a picture taken from hers, where we're showing the axis that the sun is here in Virgo and it's opposite to the sun that's in Pisces. And when we have the full moon energy, it's actually reflecting its opposite axis. And what's really incredible about this right now is that for the nodes for the entire world, the North Node is in Pisces and the South Node is in Virgo. And we all have our own individual node. And your North Node from when you were born is where you're growing into for this lifetime. And the South Node is like all the wisdom and like all the ways that like all the things that like you can get rid of that like you don't need because you've already had so many experiences in that energy. And so the astrology that I've been researching is all leading up to this amazing event in February 20th, 2026, where Saturn and Neptune are going to be conjunct at 0 degrees Aries. And the last time we had this placement was during the European Inquisition, where the Catholic Church was murdering people if you didn't believe in the Yahweh God. And so we're going to come back to that energy again. But because of our current reality and because of the other placements, it's actually going to be more about what artificial exterior God are you going to put inside your body with the AI technology and the bioengineering. And so this is part of the cyclical thing that for women to sit around and talk about this to prepare for the energy was seen as evil. And so we weren't allowed to talk about this. But that's like the power of what we have. And the only thing that we need to do is actually just process our own feelings that are in our body. That's the only work that you need to do. So, the energy. The Virgo full moon offers a potent opportunity for the transformation within the context of the PHAT life. Process, heal, align, transcend, aligning deeply with your focus on embodiment, feminine sovereignty, and energetic mastery. This lunar event is not just about personal refinement, but about shedding the perfectionist, self critical, control driven shadows of Virgo to embody a more fluid, intuitive, and spiritually attuned life with that Pisces placement that's also in the North Node. And the eclipse is happening at the Pisces and the Virgo axis. And an eclipse, a lot of astrologers will talk about how it's basically, I'll say God because most some say God, even though I keep saying there is no God, it's goddess. That this is where doors open and doors close, where the cosmos are going to move on your behalf, whether you're scared of doing something and you're not making the move, or you don't even know what should be happening in your life if you're not on your path, that these eclipses shake things up really quickly so that you can get on your path. And for this to prepare us for the February 2026 conjunction, it's like how much of this linear masculine hierarchy, judgment, criticism, forcing ourselves, forcing our bodies into some standard through diet and hustle culture, how much can we actually start releasing that and allow our bodies to go through an ebb and flow, whether it's with our weight or whether it's with our adherence to the habits to then where we judge ourselves. Because what you had shared, I do the same thing. Like if I do the same exact thing, like it happens. Okay, so these are all going to be you're going to have the slides in the replay, and then also there's journal prompts at the end, and then you can all of your journal prompts are going to be in one area. Okay, so one of the things that we get to do with this energy is shadow work and feminine reclamation. And the perfectionist, hypocriticism, anxiety, and control, these are the qualities that drive the binge restriction cycle and self sabotage. Because the binge restriction cycle is based on this patriarchal hierarchy of you have to work and suffer for the afterlife. And this is how they justified the how money, how people became poor under this system. And so if we take that overall overarching energy and we apply it to the food, wherever that we're being too strict and then judging ourselves if we want to eat something else, that's part of that energy that we can process and let go of. And then also the self-sabotage, where when we do have results, our brain will play tricks on us. Sometimes if your clothes start to fit loose, your brain is like, wait, there's space here. That's not how my clothes usually feel. Let me tell you to eat more so that you can get back into that weight. And so the sabotage comes up in a lot of sneaky ways that you don't even know how how your mind body operates to like make you do things that you really don't want to do. And to that point, though, is that if we allowed ourselves to be in the ebb and flow, there's going to be times where you don't have a big appetite. And so you don't need to force yourself to eat to get your macros in, or to eat however you think you're supposed to eat. So that when your appetite does naturally increase overall through that month period, you're not in this huge calorie surplus to gain a lot of weight. Okay, and then releasing the need to fix yourself and reprogram the mind body connection to honor your soul's deeper wisdom. So, as I was saying with when I was talking about the picture, the figure of the goddess, that when the pre-patriarchal belief and symbology of a snake that was, winding its way up, and then there was wings. That was the symbology, as above, so below, that earth and sky, spirit and matter are actually one. And so, with the patriarchy cutting this in half and making the male deity and making the earth, which is feminine embodiment, and females evil, sinful, unclean, and change the whole idea around the menstrual cycle into being unclean, then we actually have an indoctrinated split of the mind body within ourselves, and also between spirit and the earthly plane. And so in your journal, you could explore how control and perfectionism fuels your dieting cycle, and you can contrast it with the Piscean surrender to your body's wisdom. Again, of like, if you don't have a big appetite, you don't have to force yourself to eat, so that when you do have a bigger appetite, you can eat. And overall, you don't have a calorie surplus to where you gain weight if you are eating in a way to prevent weight gain. Okay, so these journal prompts, like I said, they're going to be on one slide all together so you can screenshot and have everything. But we want to think about, how does perfectionism sabotage how does perfectionism sabotage body liberation? So where do you force yourself or your body into a diet or workout cultures that rule the linear achievement? So where are you not actually allowing your body to have ebbs and flows because you're like, no, I'm doing this for 21 days no matter what, when that actually might be counterproductive to your actual body's rhythms? And then, how can I embody trust over control? What food rules or excessive exercises can I release? I did this a lot with excessive exercise and caused a lot of my injuries in the past, in the 2020 hindsight reflection. And then, how can I heal the Virgo shadow to embody manifestations of my mind slash moon slash menses? Because again, those words were all interchangeable. So we have 2 weeks of the wane to the last quarter moon, where the 2 weeks after today and tomorrow, you're really going to be able to observe what in your life that you can release, whether it's the inside talk of judgment or it's the actual things that you're doing that aren't in alignment with that Piscean flow. And then leading up to the new moon, then you can actually start to like generate some fire, especially because the new moon is going to be in Aries, where it's your go energy, it's your initiator energy. And so you can start to think like, okay, if right now this is a culmination of all of my inner work leading up to this moment, what wisdom am I going to integrate? What in the next 2 weeks can I let go of? And then what can I start to plant for me in the new moon that's coming on March 29th? And where do I want to be 6 months from now? Because that's really how our goal setting should be going if we're actually doing it with the earth. Okay. And then the cosmic alignment and magnetic body energy. Neptune rules Pisces, and Neptune is a planet that is has illusion and delusion, and it goes along with spiritual resurgence, spirituality, religion, all those things. Other cycles, like in the 1800s, and is when like a lot of resurgence of the occult and a lot of things that we see today that are like the rabbit hole conspiracy theory type videos. And so we can really see how this energy circulates, how it keeps coming back. For us to have Saturn and Neptune both in Aries for the next couple of years to start a new chapter in society, we're really going to see an ability to put our spirituality into practice, into a lived experience, which is what it was a long, long, long time ago. And then the electromagnetic shifts. So the transpersonal planets that have to do with how humanity, how the collective mind operates and how civilizations rise and fall, and like how we can like name, okay, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, the Golden Age, the this age, they all have a specific placement with the planets. All those big planets are moving this year. And so there's going to be a lot of breaking apart of society as we're in order for us to create a new type of society. So now more than ever, we're actually going to be transmitting a whole lot of psychic energy through the subconscious mind and these electromagnetic shifts. So what we're able to do is if we get into our body and we exercise. So I love to lift weights. I love to lift really heavy, especially if I'm in a bad mood. I feel like that really like puts my energy, like expels the energy. Then there's also like sexy dancing that you can do, or like moving your pelvis around, or like jumping and shaking and like getting the energy out. These are all things that you're able to work with because of that North Node in Pisces, because we're going into the spiritual realm. We're going to be in the spiritual realm for another like 15 or 16 months. Okay, so these journal prompts will come up later also. How can I embody my intuition, my wisdom? And songs about intuition, magic, and manifestation would be really good ones to listen to. And then, like what I just said, jumping, shaking, animalistic movement, sensual movement, that's all really good stuff to shake the energy out when you're doing this. Okay, and then movement, energy work, and body alchemy. Movement under this moon should shift from rigid structured exercise to fluid, intuitive, and soul led movement. For me, that still comes to lifting weights because that's just like what I love. And I feel like I'm connected to my soul in that moment because I can visualize the muscle groups and I can feel them. So for me, like I'm still going to still be doing that. But what I think that what we really want to be after is that we're not doing something because we think we should, because that the should energy is that overarching Saturn, where in different things that you get into, Saturn is also another name for Satan, is also connected to the Illuminati and the cults because Saturn ate his children. So when we do anything overboard, we're actually channeling into that energy. And we can discharge the energy by walking barefoot, by grounding. I have a grounding sheet that's plugged into the wall. If you sync your breath with your movement, so like Pilates or yoga is really good, and that will help you integrate the energy. And then the eclipse rewires energetic structures. So the dense Virgo energy into Piscean flow, anywhere that you're in judgment, that you're super critical of yourself, that's that energy. And part of why I've been so angry and so sad reading this book is because I'm like reading in my hands the indoctrination of how women have grown to hate our bodies so much. And all the depictions of the goddess is voluptuous. And it's like how much diet culture is telling us that we're supposed to be skinny. So I've really had like a lot on myself to like really analyze, why is it that I want to show muscle? Do I want to show muscle, or is this part of the indoctrination? How much is this system actually living in me? And so this is, you could take it as deep as you want and as reflective as you want. So your movement prompts, instead of a journal prompt, if you listen to songs that are about liberation and freedom, I love Bob Marley. I love angry women songs from like Janis Joplin, Black Magic Woman, where I'm like, yes, you motherfuckers, we are magic. Like this is us. Those types of things. And then if your body feels different during the eclipse, you can use it to manifest. Now, I will say this, a lot of astrologers will talk about you don't want to manifest with an eclipse because it's volatile energy. You don't know where it's going to go. So don't set an intention because you don't know what will happen. I feel like the eclipses are like, okay, if we know Pisces is about the feminine embodiment and the cosmos and the mystery, and we know Virgo is about getting to work and putting things in order and harvesting our creations, then how can I like get into that even more? How can I be more open to transmuting all of this wisdom into something that could actually take place? And how much can I allow this energy to just pop into my brain and have intuitive insights at a moment's notice? That's how I think about the eclipses with this energy. Okay, almost done with this one. The Disruptive Truths and Reclaiming Feminine Power. This one is I've had my opinions about religion for a long time, and I've had a lot of people give me feedback to say just don't talk about it. But this is actually like history. And so when we're reclaiming feminine power and we're actually speaking the truth, like this is why people were burned, you know. I was able to speak with the descendant of Giordano Bruno, who was in jail for eight or 9 years by the Catholic Church because he said that we live in a multiverse, and he said before the other person, he said that the planets rotate around the sun. So he was in jail for saying that, and then 8 or 9 years later, he still said, no, I'm not going to say this is not true. They hung him upside down and they burned him. I was able to talk to one of his descendants and her son. So the disruptive truths are not that fun to talk about, but they have real impact on everything that's happening now. And so if this is like something that you really want to have for yourself to know the truth and reclaim the feminine power that was taken from us, these would be some of the things that this moon is about: reclaiming divine feminine wisdom beyond the patriarchy, that we can trust our body's wisdom, we can trust our connection to the moon, and we don't have to be afraid that there is going to be a witch hunt. And that's like a big one. And I had actually said that to this woman. Her name is Lori Bruno, and she said, we're going to be stronger this time. And so, because I told her I'm really afraid, like this is what, you know, the witch hunts are what were happening last time we had this energy. And she said, don't be afraid. I wanted to come in here and talk a little bit more about the Brunos because I did not give that story justice whatsoever. I just talked way too fast, and I think I left out some good points that I want you to know. So Lori Bruno is a witch, and a witch is a bad name. Witchcraft is crafting your experience of being a creatrix. And so witch is not a bad thing. It does not mean that you are worshiping Satan. Satan isn't even real. It's a made-up construct. My point is that when I have been reading this book, and probably the more that I'm talking about the goddess and the witch hunts, my algorithm on Instagram changed. And my discovery feed had a reel of Lori being interviewed. She is a witch in Salem, Massachusetts, and she's in her 80s. And lo and behold, you can actually just call her. You can go to her website and get her phone number and call her. So I did, because I was like, who is this person who is related to someone who was murdered during the Inquisition? How is this even possible? So I called her, and she called me the very next day, which happened to be February 20th of 2025. And at the time, I had the date wrong for the conjunction. I thought the conjunction was February 26th of 2026. It's the 20th. I spoke with her a whole year in advance. I mean, like, how can you plan that? So anyway, she calls me and she leaves me a voicemail because I was at the gym and I put my phone on do not disturb at the gym. And when I pulled my phone out to change the music and I saw that she called, that it was her area code, I was like, oh my God. And I saved her voicemail. So I call her back and she's like, Lauren, give me 5 minutes. So then I have to wait to call her back again. I'm like sitting there, like watching the clock until it's 5 minutes. She answers and she's like, what can I do for you? And I just was like, well, I've been on this search for God for a really long time, and I found out that God is made up and that it's actually the goddess. And I'm really afraid because we have this astrological transit that's coming up, and it is the same energy that we had during the Inquisitions. And I was crying. I'm outside the gym crying. I have mascara everywhere. Like, it was just a real mess. But we're talking and talking and talking, and she's telling me like not to be afraid. And she asked me, who is the author of this book? And so I tell her the author of the book, and she goes, oh, they were on the right track. They wanted to say more. Buy this book. So she tells me to buy another book, and I actually own that one already. So my point is, though, is that we're having this conversation and I'm telling her I am so afraid, and I don't want to cry right now. I told her I'm so afraid because what happened, like what they were able to do, and this stuff of people being murdered happens now, in other areas. Like, it's not happening to me, but this energy is like palatable to me. My sun sign is Pisces, 12th house Pisces. Like, I feel it. And so we're talking about it, and she said, not to be afraid, that we're stronger this time. And I think it makes me emotional because there's so many times that I've felt really crazy, and the connections that I make to things, people have kind of been like, oh, or like maybe not so many people have said this, but like it feels like if I were to say, this feels like a deep connection, oh, you're just being dramatic. Or if I say, oh, I can see how these dots connect, the energy is similar, but this is how it's playing out for the current time. Oh, you're just pulling straws. You're just trying to, you're making something out of nothing. And so to speak with someone who has a connection to it, to that time, was just like this stuff is really real. And so like that's what makes me really emotional about it. And I when I was watching the video to edit it, I just didn't like how fast I went through that section, because she's really incredible. She finds bodies, from people who have been murdered and dumped somewhere. Like, she's one of those psychics. And I watched a lot of her videos, probably all of the videos that are of her on YouTube, and she's just incredible. And I had a reading with her son, because she doesn't do readings anymore. And I had a reading with him, and it was just absolutely incredible. As soon as we got on the phone, he's like, who's so-and-so? And he said the name of somebody, and I go, oh, well, that's da 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 da. And so that was like really wild, because we didn't have any connection prior. And yeah, so I wanted to say that because Lori Bruno, Giordano, her ancestor, he stood up to them. And even after being in jail for so long, when he was given the opportunity to save his life, he chose not to. He chose not to cave in. And there's monuments of him depicted upside down, burning at the stake. And it's just horrific. And so what I kind of think is going to happen with the conjunction next year is, because of the placements being in air and fire signs, and because of bioengineering, and because of the transhuman agenda and how Elon is associated with the US government. And by the way, this is not like, this would have happened no matter who was in the presidency. Like, our country is set up to have the facade that there is a way to vote, but they're all working together behind the scenes. This is how the patriarchy works. And yeah, women can get indoctrinated into it also and participate in it. And we're so far removed from the inception that if you're white, it is really hard to see. Black, brown, yellow, they all know it because they experience it more. And it's more, they experience it more on a consistent basis right now, but also they're closer to the source of having the verbal stories being passed down from colonialism with the American country in particular. So for us, for white people, I think it's taken a lot longer for us to access this information psychically within our own body. But what was my point of that? Oh, so what I think is going to happen with the energy is that as the patriarchy is creating more and more problems, like they just plowed down a bunch of land in the Amazon to make way for a road for a climate change conference. Like, none of what they do makes sense. And they have so many of us so disillusioned to not see that they are the problem and the solution. And so what I'm kind of thinking is that the way things are going with bioengineering, with the vaccines, with the transhuman agenda to want to upload our consciousness to a cloud or put a chip in our brain to make things easier for us, that it's going to be presented in a way to say, isn't this great? You are going to love this, because colonizing us probably is not going to work. By force probably isn't going to work, but manipulation will work. And for me, I'm like, who's behind the button of the chip? If we sign up to get a chip put in our head and it interacts with electromagnetic signals, and they're going to tell us it's going to interact maybe with our brain waves. No, 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 no. They've got their 5G towers. It's probably going to go to 6G to 7G. We got our microwave. We got our EMF. Like, there is going to be someone who is going to be orchestrating people moving like puppets because of these things that they're getting inserted into their head. But not only that, I want to say one more thing to explain why I have so many fears around this. The other thing is that if you look into the information about the mRNA vaccines, some things will say, oh, no, 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 there's no nanotechnology. Other articles will say, yes, there is, and it's the best thing in the world. And then some things will talk about how this nanotechnology is a protein that self-assembles into the DNA for protection. And then other articles will talk about the nanotechnology being self-assembling robots. And if you search, sometimes, like when I did a search, I had, no, there's no nanotechnology. And then 4 articles down, it said the amazing things about mRNA vaccines and the nanotechnology. So we don't know. We don't know if it's a protein or if it's a metal thing. We don't know what's going to happen with further bioengineering and being sold a miracle vaccine for cancer. We don't know what it is that they're going to do, but the astrology matches what air and fire and mind represent to then put into us a false perception of that savior, of that sky god being something that's going to save us from this lowly earthly plane, when if we actually got back to basics, it was that it is that we are in unison with the earth, we are in unison with each other, and there should be balance with give and take of these resources. So that is why I have the tears. Okay, so back to the ceremony. So other things are the control, restriction, perfection, that this moon is about breaking that spell. So we can at least always come back to this moment in the future when we are feeling that we have that perfectionist pull and we're judging ourselves, that we're like, wait a minute. I tuned into the Virgo full moon, and I can tap into this energy to remind myself that I don't have to judge anything that's going on with my body or my intuition. And just that coming back to this moment of wherever you are watching this video, you're still able to pull this energy because this energy is continuous. And so you're going to be able to come back to that all the time so that you can keep processing whatever comes up as we move through these transits, because they're going to get really intense. This one also, they knew. They took our ancient knowledge, made it evil, killed us, but still hung on to the knowledge about what the energy in the sky does for their own gain. And so, like, even Gemini, you know, the Google Chat GPT version, Gemini, Uranus is moving into Gemini. Gemini is the doors of the universe. Uranus is a unpredictable planet of the Great Awakener. So it's like Uranus is moving into Gemini this year. Why would they name it Gemini? Because it matches the energy. So back to Christopher Columbus, he knew that this eclipse that we are experiencing tomorrow on the 14th of March is the blood moon eclipse, And there's pictures on the internet of him pointing and the indigenous people being, oh, and so he was able to convince people that he was sent from God. And then that Christian indoctrination was able to happen in the indigenous cultures of the Americas. So it's the same shit, different cycle. And so what we can really do that is disruptive and reclaiming our power is calling out the systems that profit off of our disconnection from our bodies. Because we're really it. Like, we're really the powerful part of the civilization. Okay. I think your journal prompts for this one is, how can I break the shadow of perfectionism and the patriarchal spell? How can I embody the priestess archetype with food and diet and liberation from self-judgment? And then how can I break the chains of spiritual manipulation? No one is coming to save us. It was never like that. That is a false indoctrination. Okay. So now, what we're going to do is breath work. And I won't record this because I'll get flagged for copyright on YouTube. Um, so we're going to do like about 4 minutes of it. And so what we're going to do is have our hand on our heart. You'll want to close your eyes. You'll want to thank yourself for being here. And that thanking yourself from being here really ties you into your body. And then we're going to do brain and heart coherency breathing, where we inhale for 5 seconds, exhale for 5 seconds. And then we imagine something that would make us feel love, joy, appreciation, kindness, or care. And what that does is the electromagnetic signal of our heart is going to be in creative theta uh, um, currents that put our brain into theta, which a lot of people call the God zone. This is where we are not in fight or flight, where we have tunnel vision to try to get out of danger quick. And when our electromagnetic signal of our heart is feeling the imagined experience of love, joy, appreciation, kindness, or care, our brain and our heart are connected. And when the brain and the heart are connected, that's the electromagnetic signal. So our aura gets programmed with that emotion. And then the frequency of the mind is going to send out the signal so that we can actually manifest that very thing. It could happen, or you will manifest an experience that will have the emotion that you're using in this brain and heart coherency breathing. This is from Heart Math Institute. They study this. It's a science and it's really good and it makes you feel really calm. And then the other thing is that because we're in such a high vibration, whichever one of those emotions that you're going to visualize experiencing, that is in contrast to fear, guilt, shame, sadness, disappointment. And so you actually might even feel a little bit of a battle within yourself to try to visualize something that would make you feel love, joy, appreciation, kindness, care. But it's a good thing because it's telling us right away that you have emotion that is very, very close to the surface that is ready to be processed. And so I always tell everybody, if you have a hard time thinking happy thoughts, don't worry, you're actually even further ahead because that's how palatable your emotions are that you can process. So that's a really amazing thing. I'm going to pause the recording so that we can have the song. Okay. These are all of the prompts. And oh, and then there was one more thing I wanted to show you. This is the lunar calendar. And so I just made this today. This is on a spreadsheet and I just started here in March. But basically, here is all of our full moons. And as you can see, there's a period where we're in a release. Then this little line is showing when there is the quarter moon, or like it on the lunar calendars, it shows the moon is cut in half. And so it's the quarter before the new, because there's like phases where it's like waxing and waning and then this one and then that one. And so then I went in and I put in where you could start to think about what you're going to plant for the new moon. And a lot of times the night before the new moon is the darkest moon. And this is where depression comes in. So like if you're, and it's a mourning period, so that then you grow into something else. And so you'll have this here so that you can think about things, and you can, Google to see what the energies are, if you want to start to think about what you want. So like if you're gonna think about what you're releasing from now until the 21st, and then you can think of the 22nd as a day that like you're like, okay, tomorrow I am planting my seeds for the next couple of days so that I can actually plant them with the energy of the new moon. And so, as the moon goes through her phases, you're actually going to be able to manifest things. And I think that this is one of the things that they didn't want us to know, because it's our thoughts and our feelings that create something. And there's information that, like, scientists think that, everything came from the ocean, and that how cells uh, separate into growing more cells, that the cells or there's something to do in particular with the female's body of having the electromagnetic signal that can create something on its own without semen, without something from the opposite sex. And so this is why a lot of people, evolutionary theories is that we all came from water. And it also is a belief in the goddess, because also the womb of the mother, when there is a pregnancy, and that the egg has an electromagnetic signal that attracts the perfect sperm. So there's so many things about how the magnetism creates something. And so if we were to say, okay, on March 29th, when we have the new moon in Aries, what is it that I'm going to initiate until 6 months from now in September, because it's a 6 month cycle that the new moon is going to actually bring something into fruition. So it's like, okay, on March 29th, what is it that I want to create by the full moon in September, which would be September 7th? And then what are all the things that I'm going to allow myself to process wisdom and release the things that I don't need, and then plant the next seed that's going to help me get even closer to that full moon germination in 6 months. But also you're planting seeds for the next 6 months and the next 6 months. And so the egalitarian societies lived by this, and they not only lived by the moon, they also lived by the menstrual cycle of the women that were in their communities, to create and give back to the earth and do all these amazing things that we don't have really practices for anymore. So that is the ceremony for tonight. Stop the share, stop the recording. Thank you so much for watching the full moon in Virgo replay. I wanted to show you where you can go so that you can get links for the live ceremonies. Go to 𝗁𝗁𝗂𝗃𝗀𝗰 and then click on Moon Ceremonies. You'll scroll down just a little bit to put your name and your email in. Make sure that you check the double opt-in so that you do get on the email list, so that you will actually get the links for the moon ceremony. And you might have to add me to your address book to make sure that these emails don't go to your spam. You can scroll below to see some of the upcoming themes of moon ceremonies. And then also, when you're on the email list, you get a reminder 1 week prior, 1 hour prior. Then you get an email afterwards with the link to the YouTube replay and the PDF files of the slides. And then you'll also get an email a week after ceremony to talk about some integration stuff. So if you are not on the email list yet, please come join us. It would be so awesome to have you in ceremony. In the replays, our intimate conversation is never going to be posted on YouTube. So you don't have to worry about talking about anything that would be something that you wouldn't want a stranger watching. We actually unpause the recording, or we pause the recording during this moon ceremony to have the discussion, so that it stays confidential and in that moment with the people who are there live. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Happy releasing with this Virgo full moon.